Hi there, this is Evan here, Valendinarius from latinum.org.uk, or you can find us at patreon.com/latinum. Now, in this little video, I'm going to introduce you to a text which you can find on Google Books. It's called Busby's English Introduction to the Latin Tongue. Notice in Busby is the long intermediate S, which we find in old books. This is from 1753. So the Latin tongue examined, and we go straight into it. This is an interesting little grammar book because it uses a format, question and answer. And I'm just going to go through the first part of it with you. I think it's a useful revision text for someone who has already learned Latin grammar and wants to just quickly go through and revise. So what is the use of grammar? A grammar teacheth the right way of speech. How many parts are there of grammar? There are 4 parts of grammar. Which is the first part? A for answer, letters, Q for question. Which is the second? Syllables. Which is the third? Words. Which is the fourth? Sentences. What is the use of letters? And the answer is letters make a syllable. And what do syllables make? A word. And what do words make? A sentence. Of letters. How many letters are there in English? 24. What letters are there in English which are not in Latin? And the answer is K, sort of, W, and Y. Where are great letters to be used? What we call capital letters in our modern idiom. At the beginning of proper names, emphatical words, sentences, and verses. What are emphatical words? So as you can see, Busby leaves nothing to chance here. Whenever he introduces something which may require explanation, he explains it. What are emphatical words? Words which are very significative. Now, we don't follow this rule in modern English anymore, but if you look at an English publication from the 1700s and 1800s, you will find capital letters scattered around all over the place, words that are not proper nouns, and they're not at the beginning of a sentence, but are words that the author wanted to emphasize. And actually, I quite like this old practice. We can't say it's not grammatical to do it, but in the stylistic method that people use now in writing, I think actually if you read a lot of people's writing, they do use capitals in this way, but we are not supposed to use it in good contemporary English. How many sorts of letters are there? 2 vowels and consonants. What is a vowel? A vowel has a sound of itself, so a, e, I, o, u. And what is a consonant? A consonant depends upon a vowel for its sound. So, how many vowels are there? 5. A, E, I, O, U. And what is Y? Answer, an improper vowel. What makes a diphthong? 2 vowels joined together. How many diphthongs are there in Latin? Chiefly 6, as in I, and then we have I, ow, a, and eo. How many in English? The English abound or have a great many, as in friend, people, etc. How many consonants are there? 19. And what are L and R called? L and R are called liquids because they can run like liquid, L and R, or R, if you do that kind of R. What is H? A note of aspiration. Aspiration means breathing. What does Q take to it to help it sound? And the answer is U. What do J and V with a vowel at the beginning of a syllable become? Answer, consonants, as in jest, vine, etc. What is C before E, I, and then I pronounced like? Now, this in English is pronounced like the letter S. But in the restored classical pronunciation of Latin, C is always pronounced K. What is TI before a vowel pronounced like? Like C, unless S goes before T, as in fustian, fustian, etc. So, fustian, here, T before a vowel pronounced like C, unless there's an S before. That rule, of course, doesn't apply to restored classical. What is G before E pronounced like? Like J. What have you in grammar besides letters? Figures. What does this figure, that's the little one up there that you can see, note? The want of a letter. That means the lack of a letter. As in tis for it is, apostrophe tis. What does this figure, little line, note? The joining of the parts of a word, as himself. We call this a hyphen. What have you besides figures and letters? Stops. What is this stop? And you see in brackets there, called a comma. What is this? And we see it in brackets there, called a period or point. What is this, one dot above the other, called? A colon, or 2 points. And what is this called? That's the dot with a comma underneath it. It's called a semicolon. And what is this, then brackets, called? A note of interrogation, or a question mark. And what is this, a vertical line with a dot under it? A note of admiration, or what we now call an exclamation mark. And what is this, 2 curved lines? A parenthesis. And what is this, 2 square brackets? It's called a parenthesis. What does this figure denote? A little line sloping forwards. In Latin, it denotes an adverb. And what does this little circumflex note? In some Latin texts, anyway, it notes a long vowel. And what does this, 2 dots over an I and a U? A separation of these vowels. So if an I with 2 dots over it or a U with 2 dots over it appears, then these are pronounced separately. Of syllables. What are syllables? The distinct parts of a word. What are you to observe in respect to the letters of a syllable? They must never be disjoined, interesting word there, disjoined means separated, in the end of a line, as stock, stirps. So they mustn't be broken up. Of words. How many kinds of words are there? 8. What are these 8 kinds of words commonly called? 8 parts of speech. And which are they? Noun, pronoun, verb, participle, adverb, conjunction, preposition, interjection. What may any of these parts of speech be? Primitive, derivative, simple, or compound? What do you mean by primitive? The original or first word. What do you mean by derivative? A word derived from the original or primitive word. What do you mean by simple word? One word or a single word? What do you mean by a compound word? Another word added to the single word. How many of these 8 kinds of words do vary their endings or may be declined? Answer is 4. Which 4? The 4 first. We delicate. That's what V-I-Z stands for. We delicate. Noun, pronoun, verb, participle. How many do not vary their endings or are not declined? The last 4. We delicate, adverb, conjunction, preposition, interjection. Of a noun. What is a noun? The name of a thing. How many sorts of nouns are there? 2. And this is where modern grammar teaching and the older style of grammar teaching changes. But I think that for learning Latin, this older style is actually more useful. So we have noun substantive and noun adjective. How do you know a noun substantive? Because it can signify alone and may have the sign a or the before it, as in a boy, puer. How do you know a noun adjective? Because it cannot signify alone, usually, and cannot have the sign a or the before it, usually, as good, bonus. But do note that sometimes in Latin, noun adjectives can slide across into the other category of noun substantive. But we will find out about that later on. How many sorts of noun substantives are there? 2. A noun substantive proper and a noun substantive common. How do you know a noun substantive proper? Because it belongs to one, as Edward, Eduardus. That's one person's name. And how do you know a noun substantive common? Because it is common to all, as a man, homo. Not specific to one, but to all. What is the varying of a noun called? Declension. How many things belong to a noun? 3 things belong to a noun in Latin: number, case, and gender. How many numbers are there? 2, singular and plural. How many does the singular number note? 1, as in a stone, lapis. How many does the plural number note? More than 1, as lapides, stones. How many cases has a noun got? In English, 6 cases, and we call them as follows: a nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, vocative, and ablative. And what is the sign of the nominative case? A or the. And what is the sign of the genitive? Of or apostrophe s. And what is the sign of the dative? To or for. And what is the sign of the accusative? It's like the nominative, only differing in place. What do you mean by differing in place? The nominative comes before the verb, and the accusative comes after it, generally speaking. What is the sign of the vocative case? O. We only find that in poetry nowadays, or old poetry. What is the sign of the ablative case? With or by, etc. How many genders are there? There are 4. Masculine, feminine, neuter, and what's called common. What do you mean by neuter? That is neither masculine nor feminine. And what is meant by common? That is either masculine or feminine. How are the genders of nouns known? Partly by their signification, but more fully by their ending or termination. Of what gender is a noun anywise signifying a male? It's of the masculine gender. And do you have a Latin rule for that? Yes. Vox qua mas exprimitur genus id fert. Of what gender is a noun signifying a female? Of the feminine gender. What is the Latin rule for that? Vox qua femina exprimitur genus id fert. Of what gender is a noun denoting both sexes of the common gender? And what is the Latin rule for that? Vox utrumque notans sexum communis habetur. Of what gender are proper names of rivers, winds, and months? Of the masculine. What is the Latin rule for that? Si flui mentis venti vox propria mas est. Of what gender are proper names of countries, islands, cities, and all names of trees? Of the feminine. Have you got any Latin rule for that? Yes. Insula feminea est, urbs et regio, omnis et arbor. How are the genders of all other Latin nouns to be known? By the ending of the nominative case and declension. And we'll end there. And so you can see Busby does a reasonably good job of breaking things down into comprehensible bits. So if you've learned your Latin grammar with a different grammar book, whether it was Wheelock's or something else, like Duge or even Adler, any other text like that, it's still good, I think, to run through this book. You can run through it very rapidly, and as you run through it, you will find out if there's stuff that you don't know that you should, and you can focus on that. Because it's very, very concise, you can get through it very rapidly, and, pardon me, you can work out what it is that you don't know as well as you should. Because if there's a question and you can't answer it, then that's something that you should know and don't know. So that's it for now. That's Busby's Latin syntax and question and answer sequence. And you can find that on archive.org, or you can find it on books.google.com. Download it for free, and I hope you enjoyed that little discussion. You can find more at latinum.org.uk, although I haven't made an audio recording of this text as of yet. But I may do so because I think it's a useful revision text just to listen to. That's all for now. Bye.